So thank you all for being here on this hot day. And I came across a poem today by Mary Oliver that I didn't know. And it's had a nice impact on me. It kind of inspired me quite a bit. It wasn't actually the poem that inspired me. It was the title of the poem. And then I looked at it, I liked the poem well enough, but I almost thought that this was probably, I kind of assumed Mary Oliver probably thought of the title first. That was really the poem. And then she had to find a poem to go with the title. And it's a title which I think can be adapted in all kinds of significant ways. So it uses the word prayer in it. Some of you might not have much connection to prayer or might actually not want to hear that word being used. Generally, the Buddhists in our circles don't do much prayer or any prayer. So we'll see about the word. So the title is The Real Prayers Are Not in the Words. That's half of it. The real prayers are not in the words, but in the attention that comes first. But in the attention that comes first. So here she's associating prayer not to praying for something, but rather a certain kind of attention that comes first. And the question is, what kind of attention is that? That you would consider attention as a kind of a prayer. So now we can adapt it in Buddhist terms perhaps. In Buddhism we talk about meditation. And maybe we can say real meditation is not in the technique, but in the attention that comes first. Real meditation is not in the technique that you're doing, but in the attention that comes first. Or refuge for Buddhists. Real refuge is not in the words. I take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and the Sangha. But rather in the attention that comes first. So what attention is it that comes first? What way of attending, what being in the world, what way of being aware, knowing what's happening? So that seems like the obvious question to this title. And so maybe the rest of the poem is the answer to that question. Maybe the rest of the poem is trying to evoke or describe or point to, maybe to evoke the kind of attention that she's referring to. So I'll read the rest of the poem, and with that background for it, and see if this might do it for you. Maybe this evokes a certain kind of attention, or maybe it raises questions about what are you doing when you're paying attention, when you're bringing attention to whatever it is you're paying attention to. What is it that you're doing when you're aware that can never be called a prayer, that it can never be called a refuge, that you would never associate this as meditation? So the poem goes like this. The little hawk leaned sideways and, tilted, rode the wind. Its eye at this distance looked like green glass. Its feet were the color of butter. Speed, obviously, was joy. But then, so was the sudden, slow circle. It carved into the slightly silvery air, and the squaring of its shoulder, and then pulling into itself the long, sharp edge wings, and the fall into the grass where it tussled a moment, like a bundle of brown leaves, and then, again, lifted itself into the air. That butter-colored clenched in order to hold a small, still body, and it flew off as my mind sang out, "Oh, all that loose blue rink of sky, where does it go to, and why?" So here she's watching something that some people will find inspiring or beautiful or captivating, to watch a hawk soar in the wind, soar in the sky. It can be quite beautiful to watch and see, and sometimes you can feel lucky to be outdoors and really get a good view of this beautiful, majestic bird. So here she's watching it, and then she sees and watches it as it dives down to catch a prey. And it does. And what's remarkable for me is she treats the catching of the prey in the same simplicity and almost like the same kind of awe or something as she does just watching the hawk circle around. And she doesn't seem to miss a beat, or doesn't seem to somehow shudder. Oh my God, it's a mouse. Gopher has just been caught. Just like it's just nature watching it. So she's watching it, all this, but then the most remarkable part of the poem for me is the bird lifts up and goes into the sky. And sometimes you go see a hawk or bird fly into the sky and it kind of disappears, high enough for something. And then she has this question, oh, all that loose blue rink of sky. The only place I know that the word rink is used is in ice cage rink. So probably she's doing that. This bird is skating. That's what a bird skates on. And she's referring to our sky that way. Oh, all that loose blue rink of sky, where does it go to, and why? Well, have you ever asked that question? It's kind of a silly question, right? Where does the blue sky go to, and why? It's not a question that maybe a really rational scientific person would ask. In fact, the first time I was out in the high mountains when I was 15. Beautiful high alpine place where I was going to a boarding school. It was a reform school. But it was beautiful, high up in the mountains and snow-capped mountains and stuff. And I was walking one of the little country roads with my older friend from school, and I was just in awe of what I was seeing. And in that awe, I said, why are we here? What's this about? And he looked at me and said, don't be silly. And something in my heart closed when he said that. It took years for that to open. And so here she has this, this awe and this amazement that she asks a question that, don't tell her she's silly. Something might close that shouldn't close. But why? This blue sky, why is it blue? It's not like a question that wants an answer. I think it's a question which is just open to amazement to possibilities, to something that is maybe that we can't understand or don't want to understand, or something that maybe, what is it associated with? Is it a kind of reverence? Is it kind of respect, awe, mystery? What is it? So she uses this whole example of this hawk and the hawk soaring off and having this question, where does the sky go and why? As an answer to the title. The real prayers are not in the words, but in the attention that comes first. So what is it? What is it? The attention she's referring to that's being described in the poem. Why is that before prayer? Why is that the prayer? Why would she call that prayer? Why would she see it in that kind of religious terms or in value like that? I think that's the question this wonderful poem leaves us with. So I don't know, some of you don't care for poetry. I just cared for the title. But what do you think? What do you think? What kind of attention do you think she's referring to when she says, but it is found in the attention that comes first, before the prayer? What do you think? Anybody, if you want to? Yes, so if you could use the mic.
Is this working? It sounds like it is. Perhaps the simple awareness you referred to at the end of our meditation. I think that's my answer.
Thank you. Yeah, that was kind of what was in the back of my mind when I did that meditation, was this poem. Kind of maybe even prepare for hearing the poem, maybe. Thank you. Anything else that occurs to you?
I just think sort of grounding in simple awareness can really open up a lot of space. Kind of like you described. I actually was really touched by the quote of, when awareness is simple, it leaves space for the heart to participate in the world, or something like that. Didn't quite get the wording right. But I really find that to be true, that when awareness is simple, then there's this beauty, there's this awe, there's this sort of fascination with the world. And perhaps that's what she's referring to.
Thank you. Very nice. What was your name?
I'm John.
John. Sage.
Hi there. I am in fact Sage. So the attention that I thought about was kind of attention that just belongs to people in general. The way that like hawk is, I don't know a better word for this, but like built to do the thing that it does and to like attack the mouse and like go up. I thought it was kind of like juxtaposition. Like it just did its thing. Like the attention is what we do. Like we've evolved to like, I don't know, be able to like exert a lot of like power over the world, natural world. But at the same time, like, why are we evolved to appreciate like a blue sky? Like that doesn't seem necessary. And to ask a question like, where does it go and why, of like something that has no utility is the attention that sounds like prayer to me, just kind of like.
Fantastic. I like that. So this idea, if I understood you, that the hawk's doing what it's doing, and there's something about we doing what humans can do when we watch kind of in awe at the hawk and see what's going on, and ask questions that have no utility in a sense, but we have so many things we can do with our wonderful minds. Why would we do that when we can go out and make money? We can work more extra hours and the overtime, isn't that more important? The question, what evokes for me your wonderful statement is, this idea of no utility. When it's your time to die, say if you're lucky enough that you're dying, not really in any pain, but you're definitely going. It's like this is the last hour maybe you have. Would you rather be doing your taxes? Wait a minute. In 1999, I think I paid too much. And there's all these things that, or would you rather kind of like look at job listings to see, like, I need a promotion? What would you do during that last hour? And in that last hour, would that kind of question that has no utility, would that be really the best way to spend that time? Would that be the most amazing, wondrous way to be in the last hour, just looking kind of in a certain kind of reverence and awe? Because we've learned that it's found in the attention that we have in our natural capacity for attention, where attention has been set free of our preoccupations, our fears, our desires, our hates, latching on, that even laying at our deathbed and looking up in the air and the dust motes are glittering through the sunlight. Wow. Where does that light go? Why is it here? But just, oh, wow, just watching it. What would you do on your last hour? Which direction would you go? What would you do with your attention? Do you know something about how to be present that becomes your refuge on your deathbed? That it's so easy in this kind of life that many people live here in Silicon Valley to say what Sage said. Oh, so well, I thought, but, that some people might say, Sage didn't say this, but it has no utility. We have this capacity for awe, reverence, for using our attention a certain way, discovering a new kind of, that is maybe one of the most precious things we have. And to put it in the context of the 1 hour to live was just a highlight for you. Oh, well, in that hour, what has utility? What does that mean? In that hour, what's most important? And this is a very important part of Buddhist training, is to consider this kind of thing, like the last hour. Because it highlights our values, highlights what's important, highlights a possibility that we don't have to wait for our last hour to live by. And people who shy away from any discussion of death, any consideration of it, sometimes are losing that possibility of using that last hour as a wonderful treasure, as a reference point, as an exercise. How do I want to be now? So anyways, I talked too long. I'd love to hear some of you more about it.
So back to the idea of prayer, I almost see prayer as a different state from meditation. I feel like it's an outpouring
Nice.
of one's heart,
Uh-huh.
whereas I think meditation, I'm more in a receiving mode. And so when it has to do with awareness or like the attention, I think it seems to me that it's the prerequisite to open your heart to begin with, so it can begin that outpouring. And so when you say,
Nice.
attention is required for prayer to be a real prayer, that's sort of how I connect the dots.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like it very much what you said, and how you start off by saying maybe prayer, meditation doesn't have to be two different things. Depends what you mean by prayer, of course, but I think that there's something profound possibility in prayer that is very similar to what we do in meditation, depending on how we use our attention. Any other thoughts about what kind of attention that that Mary Oliver might be pointing to. And maybe not, trying to explain her, but maybe explaining how would you understand this for yourself?
I'm I'm not sure exactly what to say, but there's something about prayer that to me is an asking.
That is what?
It's an asking,
Asking,
or a request, or and the attention more is appreciation or an awareness.
Mm-hmm.
They seem different to me.
Great. Yeah, some people associate prayer with asking, and this is something very different, attention. But not everyone associates prayer with asking. And so there's whole other associations people have with prayer. And
So I'm thinking about this attention, and what comes to my mind is there's no need to interpret anything, no need to assign any meaning, just watching, and it's kind of like no burden of needing to assign meaning or interpretation. And so prayer for me, I think about my grandmother who prayed a lot. And when I asked her any questions about what she was doing, she didn't have any answers. she didn't know what, like, I'm just doing it. There was, specific steps, but it didn't mean, it didn't seem to have a meaning. She was just doing it.
so no interpretation. So this freedom from interpretation, freedom of putting something, adding anything on top of our experience, and or wanting anything from our experience, or avoiding something, just being with something in a very simple way. And maybe that's what she found. And maybe to put words on it maybe she was a great Zen master. And she knew that putting any words of any explanation or words on it just would ruin it.
Maybe.
Great. Anybody else? Yes.
So for me, not so much about the poem, but for me, personally, I grew up Christian as a child, so prayer was like a very, that's just what I learned to do, right? And was very much part of my daily routines. I would pray at night before going to bed and, wishing for, thanking for the things that went well and wishing for things like that I hope would go well, like the next day. And then certain, experiences in my life made it such that I couldn't really believe anymore in a kind of omnipotent God that I can sort of directly talk to in that kind of way. And there was a difficult period in time then for me when that was gone and it wasn't yet sort of replaced, or that the void hadn't been filled. And for me then sort of finding, meditation and meditative practice in some sense then filled that void. So it was this switch in some sense for me from prayer to this more attentive kind. And then I guess there was one TED Talk that I saw some time ago, and I forget exactly who the pastor was, but and I actually also don't know whether that is exactly the meaning of Namaste, but he said, at least in that TED Talk, that at least part of the meaning of Namaste, that greeting in India, is that I greet that part of God that I recognize in you. And I found that to be very nice, because that sort of combined the two things for me in some sense, in saying that, okay, well, if God's still everywhere in some sense, but now it's the awareness that you practice through meditation that you need to recognize it in others. So it's a different way of sort of relating to God than it is in this sort of more cognitive, direct way of asking for things or thanking for things. So that was sort of what came to my mind. Not so much about the poem, but...
Yeah, very nice, thank you. And your words reminded me of something that when I was I did quite a bit of growing up in Europe, so I had some kind of contact with Catholic monasteries there. I don't know how, but they were kind of on the edges of my life there. So at some point when I was a teenager, I had this desire to go become a Catholic monk, and I wondered if they'd take me as an atheist. Because, and what attracted me to it was not the religion, but there was something about something in me resonated or felt, something about the lifestyle that brought a kind of, awoke a kind of embodied attention, embodied presence, a kind of embodied awareness that felt like kind of a wholeness, that things felt complete or felt settled or peaceful, or so it had this very rich, warm feeling, and the only place I knew or associated with this feeling that I had was the monastic life. That there's these monks who are going around. I have no idea if it's true, but that was what the attraction was to the monastic life back when I was a teenager, and it probably came to kind of a peak when I was 18, and I went to a monastery, maybe, a cathedral called Mont Saint-Michel. I don't know if any of you know of it, in France. And it's kind of like, from a distance, it looks like something they'd draw for a Disneyland cartoon. You're going across this flat kind of plains of northwestern France, and right near the coast. And on this little island off from the coast, this comes up, there arises this huge kind of soaring kind of cathedral with a big spire. And when the tide is in, there's a kind of a little bridge that goes out to it. And the tide is out, it's kind of, I suppose you could walk all the way without the bridge. And so I was there, and I had a lovely, I don't know why I went there, but I was just traveling around. And I found a place to stay. The only place to stay, apparently for me, was at a Pax Christi hostel, a little Christian hostel there. And it felt like I don't know, semi-monastic. It was just very lovely. I loved it there, very simple. And then in the morning I got up and I went up and they had a tour of the church, the cathedral and everything. And we went all the way around, all kinds of places. And we came to the oldest part of the complex, the monastery, was a little one-room stoned chapel that had been built on top of the island, top of the hill. And everything else had built around it and covered it, filled it. But at the very heart there was this old... And we went in there to this little chapel. Immediately I felt so much peace. It was like, wow. And then when everybody in my tour group, they all left, I kind of stayed back as long as I thought I could have permission to stay back, just to feel that peace. And so that was kind of like the peak of it. And then I didn't have that kind of peace again until I started meditating. And this whole thing that I kind of intuited as a teenager when I was young was something that then became accessible to me in meditation practice and then in Buddhist monastic life, which I did for a while. But this beautiful way of being. So for me, this attention that she talks about is something that is not cerebral. It's not like the eyes looking at something, only the eyes, but something that is a sense of whole presence and attentiveness that's fully here in all ways. like just here, present. And the seeing, the hearing is part of it, but it's not, it's only part of it. It's just there's a bigger whole here. And it comes with a feeling or a sense that this is complete. That this is being fulfilled. This is deeply satisfying. This is, this is feeling this fulfilled without having to win the lottery or get a better job or have a better relationship or all kinds of things that in the world we're trying to do to make ourselves feel complete. So that's the prayer. That's the real prayer, attention, to have this ability. And I think as Sveta has talked about it, it's something that's mostly found by being very simple, not filling it with desires and wants and doing and wanting and running away, but just here, in a simple way. So I hope that's be nice for you to consider, and to that real prayers are not in the words, but in the attention that comes first. I think it's a wonderful little thing to consider, and it raises questions. And maybe this is one of these, if it does raise questions for you, what is this? Maybe it's the kind of question that shouldn't be answered too easily.